Hello everybody, I'm Roger Whitehead. I'm the UK Advisory Services Lead for version 1. And in this version 1 webinar, really we're going to talk to you about how in UK central government you can derive new value and exploit modern capabilities by modernising some of your existing applications. In this webinar, we're going to introduce you to some of the introductory concepts, talk you through some potential areas that you might want to focus on and some opportunities that may be associated with that. And then really we have a customer example through one of the customers version 1 has been working with that tries to show how that's actually been done in a real world context. So really just a little bit about myself in terms of my role and what I bring to the area of application modernisation. I've over 30 years worth of IT solution experience across public and private sector in a whole range of different contexts. And that's covering on-premise, cloud, hybrid and secure environments. So I've really come across a wide variety of both legacy and specialist sort of solutions in that space. And I lead a specialist team within version 1 that covers architecture, implementation and delivery aspects in terms of oversight and governance from a design point of view, but also migration and modernisation aspects. So we try to bring to that a range of our expertise across the various partnerships that we have and also the technology expertise that we have also. So really, in terms of legacy application modernization, really just to bring in a few introductory concepts and why it's important and what are the industry trends that are affecting this. So as you may be aware, digital transformation has become a really significant kind of term really in recent trends. Every company or organization wants to digitally transform. And generally speaking, it's really a single particular place that people want to get to in terms of efficiencies and in terms of addressing new channels, mobile, digital channels, social media, but also a range of automation efficiencies and process dynamics that you can gain from that. And there are many different ways in which you can actually get to a digitally transformed outcome. As you can see here from some of the survey numbers from various different sources, 91% of business leaders see digital transformation as a way of generating innovation and finding efficiencies within their organizations. And also there's a compelling set of events and drivers that are making those organizations think that way. And 85% of those organizations think they must offer digital services or become irrelevant or at best sort of be in a disadvantaged place. So definitely some cross-organizational drivers and a wide range of consensus in terms of why people would do that. And we're going to talk really about how it applies in a central government context, but many of those commercial and private sector considerations can also be brought across into that public sector context. So in terms of public sector modernization, there are a number of factors really that need to be appreciated, and we certainly in our activities in version 1 have a range of appreciations of these in the activities that we undertake and the engagements that we have that drive the ability to modernize and the way in which that modernization is undertaken. And obviously this year, one of the key main influences has been the COVID-19 aspects, both in terms of operational aspects, in terms of government staff being forced to work at home or work in different ways, or work in ways where they don't have access to some of the solutions or systems that they might normally have in the office, or the levels of interaction. There are obviously budget pressures with the new government spending review starting in 2020, running for 3 years, and that will be driving organizations really to try and obtain more from less or more from the same level of investment, or maybe transfer some of that spend or offset that cost from a number of different directions. There's also a general trend within government to an acceleration towards digital, and we can see this through the activities of the Cabinet Office, GDS, and also DCMS rather, around digital economy, and the appointment of the new government chief digital officer that's coming in the future, really just driving that need for government really to move to those more digital ways of provision. And that's matched really on the demand side by the citizens in the UK who are really having those expectations that services from government, are more available 24/7, are more personalised to them, and deliver those more efficient kind of interactions without having to go through the traditional sort of call centre route or through particular elongated activities. So there's definitely a change in the perception of expectations and what's required. Equally, government is trying to push through strategies around cloud first and cloud adoption, really to try and leverage some of those efficiencies and make the availability of those technologies that enable those digital channels more prevalent. But there are also some areas of pressure and challenges to be overcome, particularly in the realms of legacy and technical debt. Many public sector organisations do have a range of applications, solutions, and systems and environments, many of which are mission critical and have been built, a long time ago to a particular set of requirements, and therefore they're carrying a level of technical debt because of the challenges in updating them and migrating those to new, more modern platforms. Also, the basis on which many of those legacy and mission critical systems are run may not always lend itself to being able to change in a flexible and agile manner. The nature of those contracts often may be long term, and there may be particular aspects and arrangements with those suppliers in terms of the separation and the engagement of those suppliers. That can often make things more difficult to do modernisation, and particularly to replace systems on a wholesale basis if there's a division of responsibility within that. So we're going to show how some of these areas can be addressed by application modernisation, and just really try and reflect some of those expectations in terms of what we're going to cover in this session. So really, why modernise? Why would you look to do application modernisation? What are the processes and what are the benefits for doing that? Well, really there's a number of areas, and I think the key thing with application modernisation is you're not necessarily looking to replace the entire application. You're looking to make targeted change, maybe evolve areas of the solution, but to do that in a way that addresses certain kinds of triggers. So you may well have your application legacy estate, as you can see on the left-hand side there, but really the modernisation process itself is looking to look at that estate, look at those legacy elements, and see if there are areas of business value that can be improved or new areas of value that can be delivered from them, and understand what that might mean. So really we're going to talk through those areas, and what we're doing so really we're going to look at how you can protect the business value that you might have, but do that in a way that also improves business efficiency, gives you that development agility, reduces that cost of maintenance, and increases the use of those modern technologies. So what we're trying to do is to deliver change, deliver business process improvement, deliver those efficiencies, but in a way that doesn't risk those critical core systems, or if it does so in a way that's controlled and well mitigated. So it's really trying to leverage the advantages of new processes, new modern approaches, and evolve that to a way that can use more modern technologies to support those future channels, but really a way that is risk averse, or at least with where the risks are clearly understood and mitigated. And the aim is therefore to take many of those constituents of modern applications, such as mobile, artificial intelligence, cloud, and bring those into application modernization. So moving to cloud may not necessarily modernize the application, but is a contributing factor that allows you to modernize the solution itself. So it may not be the end point or the key area, but it is a supporting thing to do that. And we'll talk you through how and where that fits in the next few slides. So what are the triggers for application modernization? Well, if you see projects and if you see new requirements coming through or compelling events, these are the kinds of triggers that you might want to consider application modernization for. So really it's where you have legacy platforms and applications that may be approaching obsolescence. So they may be becoming out of support or nearing end of life, or suppliers have given indications that they're no longer going to be supporting those on a widespread basis going forward, and that may therefore provide you with an opportunity to say, are there aspects of that legacy estate that we could look to modernize without risking that wider landscape? It may be you have new and emerging requirements, such as the changes in working practice through COVID-19, or ways of working without paper, for instance, that require you to be more digital because you don't have access to that information, or maybe you want to minimize the use of those particular physical artifacts. So emerging requirements, new ways of working, new responsibilities. You may be looking to close an existing data center, whether it's your own or a third-party data center. You may be wishing to consolidate those together. So there may be the opportunity there to look at more modern applications that support that better, or that can do things in a way that doesn't have that same environmental requirement. Contractual and license renew timescales and timeframes, or be that annual or multi-annual, can actually also generate those opportunities to review, because it may be that the cost of those licensing renewals, particularly with those expensive mission critical systems, may be an opportunity to see if a more modern solution or modern application in full or in part can help you address some of those cost aspects and revisit some of those requirements that you may have. Are you potentially licensed in a way that you no longer need, or you may want to wish to a different kind of licensing based on new ways of working? There may also be a range of security concerns caused by that legacy application estate, or potentially by a movement to cloud, a migration to cloud, that may mean it raises certain security concerns that weren't relevant or prevalent before. Therefore, you may want to look at a more modern solution, a more modern application, or elements of that solution that can help address some of those security concerns, maybe around data and GDPR, or various other aspects of that solution that you may just want to look at from a security perspective. And obviously, this is something that GDS and NCSC in the UK context are very aware of and pushing forward. There may also be a range of experience issues, both for users in terms of productivity, availability, accessibility, that you also may want to address. It may just not be matching the way that users work, or there may be inefficiencies in the user interfaces, or in the reporting mechanisms, or the data insights that you provide. And indeed, in terms of the support aspects of it, there may be that things are just simply difficult to support, or don't really lend themselves to a way that's easy to operate in a new modern kind of context. So there may be a range of experience issues that you may want to address that may help drive this, both in terms of productivity gains and also in terms of maintenance efficiencies that may come through. And there may also be, even in the public sector context, a range of external business change that may drive this, whether that's changes of responsibility, change of governmental demarcation, potentially merger of departments in various different ways and responsibilities. All of those areas can provide an opportunity for application modernisation. And really what we're saying here is, rather than just simply looking to replace an entire provision, maybe look to see if there are ways in which you can achieve what you need by a more targeted element of change based on particular requirements and particular drivers. So in terms of those modernisation opportunities, we've highlighted and touched on some of those in the previous slide, but really it's looking to see whether new project propositions or existing operational issues are fitting into some of the categories that you can see here on the slide. And that's primarily where things such as the as-is environment or the as-is process cannot support those new channels or usage patterns. So they maybe can't support more digital channels in terms of mobile and social media, or in terms of the way that users want to interact with them. It may be that they're just not originally designed to meet those changing business needs. Therefore, you need to look at modern opportunity. Rather than just simply trying to change what you have or trying to replace what you have, is there another way to look at this? Maybe in areas where you've got compliance and regulatory changes that force you to change the business processes, rather than trying to bend that existing solution into that new space, maybe there are ways of looking at more modernisation approaches to achieve the same regulatory and compliance outcomes as part of that. Cybersecurity and reputational risk and damage we've already mentioned, but it may well be that therefore when you're looking at a new range of security measures, security tools, it may be that a modernisation approach using more modern technologies, appliances and tooling may actually help address some of that as well. Generally speaking, many of those opportunities will be flagged up because they're high on the risk register, or they indicate significant levels of technical debt that really have been too difficult or too challenging to address in full. It may well be there's a modernisation opportunity to do that there. Also, those current platforms may not be able to support innovation that you want to do, and that innovation may come in a range of different ways in terms of business ways of working, or in terms of just particular areas that need to be future-proofed and addressing new requirements. And then, as we mentioned, really is where you have those user productivity, UX and efficiency improvements, where there's a large element of user voice, if you like, coming in that's saying that these applications maybe don't deliver to their needs. So we've talked really about the opportunities and the triggers and the why you would do application modernization. What are the options for how you would do this? And you may be familiar with these from the Gartner perspective, in terms of the Gartner R's, as they're called. There are a number of different ways in which you can approach application modernization. It's rehost, refactor, re-architect, rebuild, replace, and retire. For the purposes of application modernization, because you're generally taking something that already exists and retaining it to a large extent, the options around replacement and retirement don't tend to feature quite so much in the application modernization discussion and conversation. You tend to be focusing more around rehosting, refactoring, and re-architecting or rebuilding those applications as such. And this works at different scales. There may be an element of replacement and retiring as you modernize, but really we're talking here about what is the majority direction of that option. So really a rehost option is really moving or lift and shifting the application to somewhere else, and you're changing the underlying architecture and environment with that. And really that's more of a platform modernization. So typically things like cloud migration would fit into that. And whilst you are delivering a level of modernization of the application in terms of enabling wider capabilities, or maybe allowing the ecosystem where it moves to in public or private cloud to be leveraged, you're not necessarily changing the application itself. You're simply improving the environment it runs in, or modernizing that to gain different advantages. It's really with the refactor, the re-architect, and the rebuild where you're actually gaining that application change and those business process efficiencies, if you like, as part of that. So a refactor really is a light touch application change, usually with a change of underlying environment or architecture. Re-architect is where you're looking to modify the application itself, either to streamline processes or to bring in new processes or to make things easier to address by breaking things down into smaller areas so you can have individual services for particular needs. And the rebuild really is taking a new technology and rebuilding your existing solution, potentially with new processes, using a cloud native or a new digital technology. So really the difference between refactor, re-architect, and rebuild really is the scope and the scale of change that you're actually introducing. Obviously, the risk factors will vary accordingly. Application modernization generally tends to feature more in the rehost, refactor, re-architect rather than rebuild, but it really just depends whether you're looking at rebuilding a part of a bigger application. So there's a scale aspect as to where those actually will apply. So really you can take that thinking and apply that to a range of solutions that you may already have. And what we're going to look at on this next slide really is typically where and how you would apply that. So many legacy applications tend to be referred to as monolithic, in that the database, the data layer, and the user interface all tend to work in a very highly dependent and interconnected manner. So a change in the user interface may often be driven by a change in the database layer or the data layer, or adding new capability in that user interface may require changes in the data layer or the database, or changes in those modules that are within the monolith itself. And it therefore becomes a very difficult landscape in which to achieve incremental change, business efficiencies, and deliver those new channels, deliver those new areas of business change, purely because there is so much that you have to change all in one go. So the scope and scale of the change and the inflexible nature of it generally tends to make modernization difficult and digital change harder to achieve. So really, from a version 1 perspective, what we tend to do is to focus on ways in which you can reduce the size of that monolith. And that's typically looking at ways in which you can decouple some of that existing functionality away from the monolithic application that it sits in, and either replace it or supplement it with a modern digital technology that still works within the context of the existing application. So using the existing database, using the existing data layer, but delivering a modern version or modern view of that. And that may be using cloud technologies, it may be using new reporting technologies, new user interfaces, maybe adding a mobile channel, but you're not fundamentally risking the nature of the underlying platform in terms of what you're actually doing. So really it's trying to make that targeted change that we mentioned through incremental measures and delivering that. So the key to this really is often in understanding where in that monolith you can actually extract the most value and the most level of improvement for a particular expenditure. So you can see here we've broken down that monolith into a number of different areas around identity, document, reporting, governance structures, and we've applied those different R factors to each of those areas. So we could, for instance, deliver a new invoicing element by refactoring what's already there. We could change some of the reporting by replacing it with a more modern technology. But what we're not doing is necessarily risking the entire monolithic application at any one point and any one time. So we can deliver that change incrementally and as part of a streamlined set of processes, and then gradually we can replace many of the aspects with more modern technologies, and then potentially look to moving off that underlying platform if it's of a high legacy nature. So it's understanding where the business value is, understanding where the risk aspects are, and understanding how you could make targeted change to those areas that really delivers that value, or maybe automating the steps between them to deliver efficiencies through that route as well. So in this webinar, in terms of the customer example we're going to consider, really we're going to focus very much on how you can achieve business process modernization, application modernization via automation, and how you can actually automate some of these pieces together through targeted change, and actually show you how you can actually make those business processes and those applications work in a more modern, potentially more digital way together. So a number of different approaches that you can take to this, and probably one that many are familiar with, which is the more sort of classic approach, and that's by using RPA automation, or robotic process automation. What this really does is it really tries to record and to optimize and accelerate the steps of existing solutions. So traditionally with an RPA, there's no real functional change made. You're taking really a series of core and critical and legacy applications and making them work together in an automated flow, driven by lists of information, lists of data, and this typically is in those sort of core background back office processes that may need to be run many times, which are essentially repetitive, but are based on tried and trusted capabilities. Therefore, it's really just the areas of scale and parallel processing that tend to be the areas that tend to slow down and diminish the efficiency that can be achieved. So RPA technologies would typically look to model those existing processes, maybe more than one system in one go, and then try to sequence and streamline them together by providing information and doing this at a very high level of scale, very high levels of automation, and that frees up the existing user community to focus on those higher order value tasks, maybe providing more insight, more decision-making capability, whilst those more routine tasks are taken care of by the robotic processes themselves. And that will generally get you to a level of modernization and a level of process improvement. But it's really when you start to look at areas such as smart processing, which really tries to deliver the automation in the same way that RPA can do, and it may use RPA as part of what it does, but it tries to bring in some new and existing capabilities and new technologies alongside that, maybe to bring in additional sources of information, maybe to add additional capabilities to those existing legacy processes and layer on top of those using new digital processing technologies. So smart processing tends to add more intelligence, more awareness, and a wider organizational context to the existing processes. And it maybe there are areas of new development, areas of targeted change, and areas of automation that get brought in to do that. And we're going to see that in the customer example that we're going to cover off in the next few slides. And finally, you may also find there's automation that you can achieve through a more background back office automation that is really pre-processing data or collecting data or bringing together and aggregating data and context to allow more efficient handling and decision making. And that may be using an existing process, it may be using manual processes, but what the automation is doing essentially is doing a lot of that preparation and a lot of that more routine collation and gathering of information, potentially cross-referencing one source against another, maybe generating lists and content that is in a raw, more or less structured format for something else to be taken forward to do. So that may track into operational reporting, may track into analysis activity, may also track into generating cases for case management solutions, whereby it becomes aware of a particular alert or a particular activity that may require a new case to be generated in customer service terms. It may be also in terms of routing information and preparing the background context for that customer service handler to be able to go and pick up. So really, one area of business process and application modernization, really, automation is growing in importance and growing in scale, and particularly the smart processing actually adds a new dimension to that. So really, I'd like to introduce you to really our customer example in this space. Version 1 has been working with the Legal Ombudsman to actually deliver a range of application modernization and business transformation. I'd like to introduce Richard Cooper, who's the Operations Transformation Manager, and he's going to talk to you about how they achieved modernization efficiencies via their use of automation and what that delivered for them. So over to you, Richard.
Yeah, I'm Richard Cooper, so I work for the Legal Ombudsman, and I've been working for the Legal Ombudsman for 10 years. And the Legal Ombudsman is an ombudsman scheme, and we deal with complaints about authorised persons. So an authorised person is somebody who is authorised to carry out reserved legal activities in England and Wales. So those activities might include conducting litigation, which might be more commonly known as suing somebody, or probate activities, which might, for example, include dealing with activities on a will. The complaint itself does not have to be about a reserved legal activity, so it could be about anything that an authorised person does, and typically includes barristers, solicitors, licensed conveyancers, and other types of legal professional. As long as they're authorised, we can potentially investigate a complaint about them. And our business process is a three-stage process of assessment, investigation, and decision. A complainant will start with us at the assessment part of the journey, and we will take them through our processes. We could get to investigation, and we could get an outcome there. So an agreed outcome is something that we would prefer because both parties agree on how the complaint is going to be resolved. However, if we can't do that, we will ask an ombudsman to make a final decision, which will determine the outcome of that complaint. So that's essentially what we do as a service, and we are free to use as well for complainants. Yeah, so the key challenges that we were trying to address. First of all, we started looking at this about 12 months ago. And one of the first challenges that we were trying to address was understand what was being collectively termed as AI, so artificial intelligence at the time, and understand how that could be potentially applied to our business process. So we wanted to explore provisionally what AI meant and what technologies came under that umbrella. So the other thing I would say is that we do experience a high demand for our service, and that is something that all service sectors are seeing increased demands or increased waiting times for their service, particularly in the light of the impacts of COVID-19. So there was real impetus and there was a real desire to go and explore these technologies and find out how they could improve our service. So I suppose the primary challenge was one of demand, seeing what this technology and what these pieces of technology could do for us to help us deal with demand, but also to explore and have a better understanding of disruptive technology and how it could be applied. First of all, in the projects that we were doing, or the proof of concept that we were doing, but broadly across our business process. So that process involved a lot of working groups. We had lots of ideas, I would say, at the initial stage. And it really became a process of evaluating those ideas and seeing which ones we could take forwards and which ones were likely to have an impact. So those were the challenges, coming up with a solution to address demand, but also exploring AI and RPA, so robotic process automation and machine learning, understanding those more and seeing where they could be applied to our business process. So that was the main challenge. Well, broadly, we want to continuously improve our service. That is an ever-present requirement upon us. But also, there was an opportunity with the Innovation Labs, with version 1, to explore this in a way that would mutually benefit both businesses. And I think we also were attracted to this project because it didn't require any whole-scale or major IT infrastructure changes. It actually sat in a self-contained development environment that didn't cause any disruption to the business and didn't require anybody to get involved from a technical side other than the people who were involved from version 1 and myself. So we were able to make a lot of progress and do a lot of things with minimal changes or minimal requirements for support from our end of the business, and that was a real incentive to take this forward. Yeah, so the types of automation solution that we were looking to implement as a result of this, we ended up choosing robotic process automation at the front end of our business process. So it dealt with a very specific task, which is to automatically process complaint forms that are received via our website into an inbox. So we receive over 6,000 complaints via this method each year. So there was a quantifiable return on the RPA. So we could break down how long it would take a human to do that task, and then get a measure of the total time to process those forms, to give us an idea of what impact robotic process automation in particular could do. I think we were encouraged as well by some earlier work that version 1 had done with another organisation in which a very similar approach had been taken in terms of processing forms, and we wanted to take that a step further and automate some other types of processes, and they mainly relate to jurisdiction, which is our power to accept a case for investigation. So some of these checks were performed by robotic processes, which include checking that a complaint was in time. We also created a framework in which values could be used to determine whether a person was in jurisdiction as well. And we also looked at implementing solutions which would send out notifications. So a complainant could be notified, for example, if a piece of information required to complete the jurisdiction check was missing. Also, we can send out other notifications such as acceptance of their complaint for investigation, or potentially tell them that their complaint was outside of our jurisdiction. So there were two parts to it really. There were the first part, which was processing the complaint form itself, but then subsequently doing some of the checks which used to be done by a person. So when we started to think about the technology that we required to do this, to achieve those business aims, well, that was an exploratory process with version 1, and we've looked at 3 pieces of technology in order to achieve that, and those were UiPath, and I should say that these are all very broadly similar pieces of technology. The other one was Power Automate, which is a Microsoft product, and also another MS product called Azure Logic Apps. And we ended up going with Azure Logic Apps simply because it offered us the tool that we needed to perform the task, but also at the best price for us as an organization. So I referred earlier to the fact that we didn't need to make any infrastructure changes. We didn't need to change any of our complaint forms. We didn't need to create any new inbox or do anything in SharePoint. We created the system, the robotic processor outside of all of that. So it effectively plugs in to the case management system and does the things that a person would do. So it was a discovery path. I think one of the things I really liked actually with version 1 is that they really helped us understand which project was likely to have the biggest impact in terms of hours and efficiency. But we also spent a lot of time exploring the technologies that were available, and we had a really good compare and contrast exercise in which Azure Logic Apps was selected as the front runner in the end. So that's how we got there, and those are the sorts of processes that we went through to arrive at that decision. Particularly the assessment stage of our business process has been affected by this piece of technology. So what it will enable us to do is it gives us an additional capability to provide a tool to people who work at our front end to process the work, and meet the demand that all organisations are currently feeling as a consequence of particularly COVID-19, changes in working practices and ways of doing things, but also disruption to the sector as a whole. So it's one of those things that just gives us an additional capability and a quantifiable part of our business that we can apply it to. So we know that we receive a certain amount of complaint forms through our customer assessment tool, and with that, we can sit down and say, well, that equates to X amount of work, and this system can do that, giving us a saving, in terms of processing time compared to a human. And if I just use some broad figures, I think it's absolutely okay to talk about those. So broadly, to create a form or a case from a complaint form would take a person around 15 minutes. That doesn't include the other activities that they also need to complete on a case. We got that down to 45 seconds with a robotic processor. And that was with a caveat that we could increase that processing time. So that was the first thing, that 15 minutes and 45 seconds. That's a huge difference. And if you're applying that to 6,000 forms, then you can already see, without adding them up for you, that's a significant impact to a particular area of business. So I think that's the first thing. The other benefits that we've got out of this is we've opened the door to this technology, and we've had a look inside, and we've seen something that we can achieve and do with this piece of technology. And we used basic automation to start with, and that's given us the confidence, I think, to take other pieces of automation and other pieces of AI forward, and really explore those with the confidence that we've done something before and we've got an outcome from it, and we can quantify it and we can measure it. So it's given us the confidence to go and do more with with innovation labs, and we are exploring another area of business at this point in time, and looking at hyper automation and more complex automation now, because we've got a bit of confidence in dealing with more basic automation. So I think really the benefit as well, the longer term benefit, is that as a business, we can start to explore and start to think about how we apply these technologies, and where in our business process, those things might sit. For example, one of the things that we looked at last week was some natural language processors, and I can see great application and potential for those types of things. So just to summarize again, it's the two main things that I would say is it will make a measurable impact into a very specific piece of work that we can quantify. And the second thing is it will help us explore AI and give us confidence to deal with other potentially more challenging projects, more complex projects, to develop our capabilities even further. I think there is a lot of interest, not just in our own sector, but also in the industry as a whole, in disruptive technologies. And it feels good to be part of that journey, and to have a story to tell as a consequence of doing a very valuable piece of work. And I hope that's been, well, I know it's been valuable for both the Legal Ombudsman and version 1. So yeah, it felt really good that these words such as AI and RPA and machine learning now have context and meaning and application, and we have something to apply those things to. So we're really looking forward. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this journey unfolds. But I think I would say that the initial science and the initial work that we've done, it's really encouraging. And I think the other thing is it opens up your mind to things that you may not have considered possible before, but with assistance, this really can help. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to sort of mention really was that I think sometimes people can be a little bit concerned about AI. I think the industry and the sector as a whole uses that term to describe robotic processing, machine learning, and AI. And there is a fear that it's about doing people out of jobs. And what I was really pleased with, I think we were all very focused on, well, that's not our aim here. Our aim here is to create a tool that both our customers and people who work for us appreciate and benefit from them. And I really think that we've done that without causing any threat or any concern to what people might be doing, or whether they will still have a job in a couple of years' time. So I'm really proud that we've done that, and that we can show that we've done something responsible for the benefit of everybody with this piece of technology.
Richard, thanks very much for that interesting and useful insight into how you've leveraged automation in your modernisation efficiencies and processes. I'd like really just to finish off this webinar really just by running through the ways in which version 1 has brought value to the organisations that we work with within public sector, and just to highlight some of the propositions that we have in this space. So we'd be delighted to have those onward conversations with you if this webinar has been of interest to you. We have a number of propositions that we think may be applicable across this space. The first one of these really is we have what we call an application modernisation fast start, which really is a packaged set of discovery and activity and analysis consultancy, if you like, to help you identify where you could deliver application modernization within your organization, what kinds of solutions may be applicable, perhaps even highlighting specific areas of interest and maybe giving you the background context to generate those onward business cases. So that's something that we're very happy to talk to yourselves about and actually sort of have an ongoing conversation. One of the things that version 1 has been particularly well known for and increasingly gained a higher profile for really is in the area of moving Oracle and legacy applications to public cloud. Version 1 is an Oracle Platinum partner and also a leading partner across a range of cloud technologies. And we've really helped a large number of customers kind of overcome those misconceptions and those challenges of moving those legacy mission critical applications, particularly those based on Oracle, to public cloud or to any cloud for that matter, and really try to overcome the perception that it's complex and expensive and difficult to achieve, and that it's just simply too big to approach. We can help you overcome and mitigate those challenges, and we'd be very happy to have those conversations with you. We have a range of expertise that we can bring to this, both in terms of the technology space, but also in terms of licensing. We have an extensive knowledge base within our licensing team who can help you with a wide range of commercial and technical challenges that may present, as well as our delivery, design, architecture and managed service teams as well. And really finally, on the right hand side, really, we've also developed a range of capabilities that can work at a different set of scales, really, in terms of helping you move to cloud in one form or another. And we have a cloud migration factory proposition that can help you move at scale once you understand those options, really, and maybe have a application modernization strategy in place. We can help you move those applications faster, potentially in parallel or with a level of optimization that makes you better prepared for delivering those onward digital and application modernization capabilities. So I hope you found that webinar useful. Really just like to finish really in saying that if you are interested in talking to version 1 about any particular areas of application modernization, you can see various website addresses and email addresses on the screen here in front of you. Also reach out to myself on LinkedIn or via other ways. I'm more than happy to have that onward conversation. So once again, thank you for attending this webinar. I hope it's been useful, and thank you for your time.